finishing touches on that. All right, so let's jump in. Let me get something ready here. Let me start by asking you guys a question. All right, so most of the things that we've talked about so far in this course have been related to businesses, getting you guys prepared to be in a business role, in a professional position. This particular chapter is about your personal finances, what you do with your money, okay? So with that in mind, let me ask you, do you guys think that stresses about money have something, is that related to how much money you make? In other words, is it just a matter of making more money and then you won't have money worries? Is that how it works?
No.
Why not? Are you suggesting that people that make a lot of money still have money problems sometimes?
Absolutely.
It was kind of a loaded question, wasn't it? All right, so yeah, so like the website that I had pulled up here for you kind of gave it away if you saw it. But yeah, we hear stories all the time about celebrities that make millions and millions of dollars that are absolutely broke. They're way, way, way in debt, maybe owe millions to the IRS.
Yep.
It happens all the time. So it kind of leads us to some research. Studies have been done on the topic too. Study after study tells us that when they poll people and ask them what is the number one thing that they worry about, the number one answer is always money.
Mm-hmm.
All other studies that ask about what couples fight about most, overwhelmingly, the answer is
money.
Money, yeah. So it's not really how much money you make. I think we can acknowledge that being a poor college student is maybe a different category, right? Because you're kind of expected to be poor while you're going through school. I was, most of my colleagues were as well. But worrying about money doesn't have to be your reality, right? At all different income levels. There's a lot of rich people that have just as much, a lot of money worries as well. So we're going to talk today about how to live your life in a way where you don't have to worry so much about money. As an illustration, I'm going to tell you a quick story about my friends, Albert and Michelle. They're two of our very, very best friends. My wife and I went to college with Albert and Michelle. Albert and Michelle got married. They met at 19, freshman year of college. They got married a year later, and they moved into a 300 square foot garage apartment, as in literally a little bitty apartment over a garage. And the rent was cheap. It was pretty cruddy, but it was cheap. And Albert, by the way, is 6'8". Big dude. The nicest person you'll ever meet in your whole life, though. He'd give a total stranger the shirt off his back. So anyway, they got married. Obviously, being college students, going to a private school, Lubbock Christian's a teeny tiny little school in Lubbock, Texas, but very, very expensive. So they were both working while going to school and getting some student loans every semester to make ends meet. Driving beater cars, you know, pretty yucky. But fast forward to they were very frugal. They tried to get as little loans as they could as they went through school. They both worked and tried to use that money. When they absolutely could, they tried to pay the interest payments on their student loans. They used coupons. They lived very, very cheaply. Fast forward to graduation. They graduate and get jobs. Albert becomes a firefighter. You know, a firefighter, in case you don't know, especially in Lubbock, Texas, does not make a whole lot of money. Michelle went on to Texas Tech across town and got her, was working on her PhD in art and got a little stipend. So she was still, you know, had a little bit of income coming in. But here's the thing. Albert and Michelle did not change their lifestyle for 5 years. They can maintain their same lifestyle, their same spending habits. They kept driving their beater cars, and they stayed in that cruddy 300 square foot apartment for 5 years. Meanwhile, Michelle did graduate and get a job as a professor, art professor at Lubbock Christian. You know, also an okay salary, but you know, it's a tiny school. It doesn't pay a whole lot. So the two of them, though, in those 5 years, they saved up over $20,000. I know they put $10,000 down on a house. They used some of the money to buy furniture for said house and kept the rest in savings. And then they fully participated in their pension plans at work. They also got individual retirement accounts that they paid into every month, had it automatically deducted from their paychecks, so they didn't miss it. And eventually, you know, they started building a very, very nice nest egg. Now they had a house now, and they fixed it up real nice. And they bought a couple of newer vehicles that they paid cash for. They never financed a brand new car ever. They retired a year ago with a giant nest egg. Now, granted, they don't have children, and you know, children are expensive, and I understand that, you know, not everybody can do this exact same thing. But just as an illustration, these are two people that didn't make a whole lot of money, but were very smart with their money. They had a budget, they had financial goals, they stuck to that budget, they maintained a lot of discipline. They allowed themselves some spending money. They loved to travel. So every year they would travel all over different locations, but they maintained their discipline over the years and built this huge nest egg. Now they're retired, and you know what they do? Well, whatever they want. They travel a lot. They do things like they love Italy. They'll go to Italy and stay for 2 months at a time.
That's genius.
It's crazy, right? I tell you what, they've never worried about money, and they made a tiny fraction of what a lot of those rich celebrities made, but yet they never worried about money. You guys can too, all right? So that's what this chapter is about. I'm gonna skip this video in the interest of time. We usually, when there's not a shortened schedule like we had to adjust because of the changes to the schedule this semester. But so we only have one class period to cover this chapter. So we'll skip this little video, but all it is like a man on the street kind of interview. They ask some college kids like what an APR means, and you know, none of them have any clue. And then they tell them that it stands for annual percentage rate, and they ask them what the annual percentage rate is on their credit card. And, you know, none of them know. And then they ask them questions about pop culture, and they're just like, they know all the answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just and by the way, we're not just picking on college kids. Adults in general, same way, and I'll get to that in a second. All right, so today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how to build a budget. We're going to talk about some strategies for building a savings account, how to use credit wisely, and then also how to build that long-term wealth, okay? And like I was saying, financial literacy or illiteracy is not just college kids. There's a link here to a very simple, well, I say simple, it's pretty easy, little quiz, financial literacy quiz. Look at the scores. I'd be happy to tell you that your business professor got 6 out of 6. Thank you. I was a little bit worried about taking it. It's like, oh man, I feel bad about myself if I teach this for a living and I don't get 100%. But I did. But look at the national average. 3 point, little over half on average, and in Texas, even worse than that. So think about it, if the number one thing is that people worry about and fight about is money, then why not become financially literate and take charge of your personal finances? All right, one of the first best things that you can do is make a budget and stick to it. I know for some of us, it's very painful. But it can be kind of fun. So there is a video, by the way, in your digital textbook on this. It's pretty good. We're going to kind of walk through it. Remember back in chapter 8 when we talked about budgeting, right? Budgeting is a detailed forecast that includes all of your inflows of money and all of your expenses. And the idea is that you're trying to get a certain amount of revenue, and you're trying to stick to a certain level of expenses so that you can reach some sort of financial goal. Well, doing that on a personal basis works very much the same way, right? It helps you create financial goals for your future. And by creating a good budget and sticking to it, you too cannot worry about money. And that's what we all want to get to, right? All right, so how do you do it? Step 1, list your monthly revenues, as in your income. And so where do y'all's income? What are we talking about? What revenue are we talking about? Where do you guys get your money?
A job. Investing.
Sure. So for most of you, it's a paycheck. Any other sources of revenue?
As government?
What's that?
The government?
Could be, right? Might have disability payments coming in. Might get maybe your student loans. You might include any allowance. Maybe your parents give you a couple $100 a month or whatever, right? All of your income. So let's start out with those. And then you start dividing our expenses into a couple of different broad categories. One of them is non-discretionary payments. Those things that you have to spend money on every month. So what kinds of things are those?
Bills.
Bills. What kind of bills?
Mortgage, light bill, internet, cell phone,
Right?
water, heat.
Absolutely. So yeah, rent is a big one, or mortgage if you have a house, right? Absolutely, those are big ones. You got to pay those. If you have a car payment, got to pay that. You got to put gas in it. You got to pay your insurance. You've got to eat, right? You got to eat. If you have any debt, you got to pay that debt payment. You got to at least make a minimum payment, right? So that's your non-discretionary payments. Now, we're going to talk about the difference between needs and wants, though, when we get to the next. I'm going to show you a budget in here in a second. So there's some things that we can probably tweak even with that those non-discretionary items. But hold on to that thought. We also then have our discretionary spending, our spending money, right? What do we spend our money on each month that we don't have to spend? What kind of
fast food, clothes.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Stuff we don't have to have. What about subscriptions? Netflix, Disney, Amazon Music, on and on. It's only $5.99 a month, but that stuff adds up, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. Going out to eat is a big one for a lot of us. For example, my wife and I, when we lived in Maryland, working in the DC area, we were making really good money at the time. But we weren't putting, at the end of the month, we weren't putting away as much money as we thought we were, or that we should. And so we went through this process that I'm sharing with you today, and we were shocked how much money we were spending going out to eat. Now, granted, restaurants and such up there are a little more expensive, but still, it was embarrassing. So you can't just think, use your memory to guesstimate how much you spend in different categories of discretionary spending. You actually need to look at your bank statements for, say, the last 3 months and categorize all your discretionary spending, put them in categories and give them actual numbers from what you have spent in the past. Start there, right? Put everything into categories and then try to say, okay, what should I be spending my money on? How should I spend my money? Can I save money anyway? And take these numbers down so that I can reach some sort of financial goal by the end of the month. Okay, so that's the process that we're talking about. After you do this, right, then you're going to track your expenses. This is not a one and, make a budget and then save it on your computer and be done with it. No, it doesn't do any good that way. You have to actually track your progress at least at the end of every month. I recommend that you do it every week. And another suggestion is that you do it jointly with your significant other and make it a team effort. Because here's what can happen. This is just my experience. If only one person does the budget, they're going to be doing this to the other person about, come on, stick to the budget. Whereas if you do build the budget together and review the budget every week together, I guarantee you it'll get you both on the same sheet of music. It can even be kind of fun. All right, let's look at an example of an actual budget. And I just kind of built this as something that we could, as a starting point. Okay, these numbers might be wildly inaccurate for you. I realize that, but work with me. All right, so this is just an example budget. So we're going to list all of our revenue or income that's coming into our house, right? So we'll start with that. Maybe you get student loans every semester and you divide that by 5 and make that part of your monthly income. You could look at it that way. Of course, that means that you can't spend all of it right away when you get the check. Your paycheck every month, right? You probably have a good idea of how much money you're going to make every month. Maybe you get a little bit of money from mom and dad. I don't know. But let's say that this is your take home. After taxes and everything, you got $1,700 goes into your bank account. All right. Well, let's say that you live in an apartment, you pay $650 a month in rent. I have no idea. Maybe you've got car payment on a used car of some kind, got to pay insurance, got to put gas in it at least every 3 or 4 months, right? Depending on how much you drive, you got to get an oil change. So you can kind of average that into, add that to your gas and average that in. You've got a phone bill. Maybe you've got a super duper unlimited data plan and you are financing the latest iPhone for $40 added to your cell phone bill every month. We'll talk more about that in a second. Maybe your utilities are add up to $150. You got to eat, right? And maybe you've got some credit card debt and the minimum payment is $200 a month. All right. So let's say then that your total non-discretionary spending, we're getting up there, right? That's just our bills. But check this out. What about our discretionary spending? Maybe you look at, by the way, that you can download your your checking account numbers into an Excel spreadsheet. That's what we do.
How would you do that?
You just go into your bank's website and click on your checking account so you can see all of your debits and credits going into in and out of your checking account. On that page, usually there is a place where you can export data. You can download all of your expenses and incomes from your checking account into an Excel spreadsheet. That's what we do because it's the easiest way to really start categorizing things and really understanding how much money you're spending on certain things, like going out to eat, or shopping, or subscriptions, or gym memberships, all that stuff. You can see what you're actually spending versus what you think you're spending, and get an accurate number, right? So once you do that, you're putting all those things into categories, and you may have different categories than this, right? These are just categories that I picked out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's shopping for clothes, maybe it's subscriptions, gym memberships, alcohol, going out to eat. This is a really dangerous one. Miscellaneous.
Mm-hmm.
That's that spending that you just have, it doesn't seem to fit into any category.
Mm-hmm.
But all this together is what we, our spending money, also called our discretionary spending. It's money we don't have to spend, but it looks like we do every month, right? So put that in your budget as a starting point. And if you do some simple calculations in Excel, right? So I grabbed my total income from up here, right? And if we subtract out our total spending, and our total spending is our non-discretionary spending plus our discretionary spending, look at that. We're actually operating at a loss. If we were a business, we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we? But
Absolutely.
do you guys know anybody that lives like this, by the way?
I do.
I do. I know a lot of people that live like this. And what do? Every month, they rationalize their discretionary spending, and they don't take any steps to make their non-discretionary expenses lower. And they say things like, well, I really shouldn't, but I'm going to go out to eat because I deserve it. I've had a rough week or whatever. And so they put stuff on a credit card, and they're just going further and further and further and further into debt. Stop the madness. All right, so let's work on this. As another step, here's what I encourage you to do. All right, I'm so shaky right now. All right, let's work on this a little bit. All right, so what can we do? So I'm just going to move this over, copy this over. Maybe my income doesn't change, fine. But there might be some things that I can do to reduce my expenses. So let's talk about that for a second. All right, so rent, I realize that $650 is not a whole lot for an apartment. But my thought process is this. Do we have to have, when we're really trying to save money, get control of our finances, if we're a starving college student, by the way, for example, do we have to live in a nice, really nice apartment? Or can we get a not so great apartment and get a roommate? Just as an example, right? You may not be able in a situation where you can do that, but there's probably things that we can do, and that might not be something we can change overnight, right? We got a lease, we got to get out of, and all those good things. We got to find some friends to help us move. You got to buy them pizza to do so. But I think if you work at it, you can probably save some money on rent, at least soon.
Mm-hmm.
You might argue that a car is a necessary thing nowadays. Got to get to work, got to get to school. I get that. But if possible, maybe try to buy something, pay cash for it. It could be a beater, right? Who cares? You're a college student. Drive a beater. Who cares? Nicer car can come later. Now I realize though that you might not have enough money to pay cash for even a beater. You might not get that little windfall from a relative or something. You might not get a hand-me-down car from a relative. That's how I got most of my cars. It was a hand-me-down from my mom or an aunt or somebody, and they were all beaters way past their prime. But if possible, I would try to eliminate a car payment at this point. At the very least, try to get a low payment. Your insurance is not going to go away. You're going to still have car insurance, even if you're driving a used car, right? There are things you can do to lower even your gas, right? Maybe you don't go on road trips to visit home as often, as an example. Maybe you take turns driving when you're out with your friends instead of you always driving. Think about, and I know that gas is really cheap right now, but there's probably ways that you can even lower that. Set yourself a budget for gas. And when you're getting close to your budget towards the end of the month, stop driving. Ask somebody else to give you a ride. Try to stick to your budget. How about a phone? Do you need the latest phone? No, you don't. You can get a free phone with most plans. It's not going to be a great phone, but hey, it's probably a smartphone still. It will make phone calls. You can check your email on it. You can download a few apps. You can probably get that for free. My advice to you is don't finance anything but a car and a house. Just as a general rule in life, all right? Don't finance furniture. Don't finance a phone. Don't finance jewelry. Don't finance clothing. Save up for something if you want it, all right? Definitely lower your phone bill quite a bit. You know that Target and Walmart both have their own budget cell phone plans that are really cheap. So something that a lot of college students do is get on their parents' plan, because some plans you can add a line for like $15 a month. Pay your parents the $15 a month. Get on their cell phone bill. Just maybe that's not an option for you, but probably things you can do to really cut down that. Utilities, just being cognizant of, turning off the lights, not taking super long showers, splitting utilities with a roommate. You probably cut that down more than you think. Groceries, same thing. I think we all know that you can spend quite a bit of money on some kind of groceries versus others and get the same amount of food, right? You may have to do a little more preparation, but it can be done. As an example, Karen and Kyle, good friends of ours, they have 2 children. You know how much they spend a month on groceries for 4 people?
A lot.
$300. They're like so frugal. They use coupons and they don't buy all their prepackaged food, which isn't good for you anyway, right? Make the kids help out with food preparation. So there's definitely ways you can set yourself a budget for groceries that seems reasonable. And I don't know if that's reasonable for you, but do some research. You can actually look online, do a search on, budgets and get all kinds of advice on creating these budgets. Debt payments. If you've got some credit card debt, for example, or a charge card for a department store, pay off that debt. Get it paid off. In fact, this sounds horrible, I know, but if I were you, if I had debt, like credit card debt, anything other than a house or a car, I would make this go away until I got that debt paid off. That sounds terrible. It doesn't sound like any fun at all, but I'm telling you, if you live like no one else, you can live like no one else. So be disciplined, get that debt paid off. All right, so let's look at our discretionary spending though going forward. Let's say that we pay off that debt, right? We get that down. Awesome, congratulations. So what can we do about some of our discretionary spending? Set limits on these things. Do you need, how much clothing do you really need depending on how much money you make? If you don't make a whole lot of money, you're barely getting by, I'm telling you, you don't need a whole lot of clothes. Buy some basics, and you might occasionally need a new pair of jeans. You can go to Target or Walmart for now, who cares? Go to a vintage clothing store. There's all kinds of ways you can save money on clothing. Those subscriptions, I'm not saying get rid of them completely, but maybe keep 1 or 2 and then, share them with your roommate, share them with your parents. Somehow you can probably get those way down. Gym membership, we got a free gym at school, don't we? The hours might not be super convenient for you, but it's free. Your apartment complex probably has a little workout room. Might not be great, but it comes with your rent. So if you're really trying to save money, you could probably get rid of that I have a gym membership, but I pay $10 a month. Go to Planet Fitness over there on Spring Valley. It's cheap. It's nice. You know, as long as I don't go when it's super crowded, I really enjoy it. Going out to eat, I'm not saying eliminate that, but again, if you're really trying to stick to a budget, set a budget. Maybe only go out to eat once or twice a week and make it a couple of inexpensive meals. Set a budget for it and stick to it. This is that really dangerous one, that miscellaneous. This is the one that used to kill our budget, my wife and I, because you get in situations where you're faced with some really, truly a discretionary spending situation. But if you really think about it, do I really need it? Do I have to have this? A lot of the times isn't the answer actually, no, I really don't. For example, I have a printer in my office. It has no ink, it hasn't had ink for a year, just because I have a budget. My wife and I give ourselves $200 each to spend for the month, and that's it, because we're trying to stick to our budget. We got all kinds of financial goals. I would love to go out to eat quite a bit. I would love to get ink from my doggone printer in my office, but it's like 40 bucks. So I can walk down the hall to the employee break room and use that printer. See what I mean? Don't sometimes try to rationalize that our discretionary spending is somehow non-discretionary, like we have to have it. So give yourself a miscellaneous portion of your budget, because you need a little bit of a cushion, but try to stick to it. So now take a look at our budget once we've done that, right? So our total income hasn't changed. But look what happened to our total spending. Way down. And look, and don't get me wrong, this maybe is a completely unrealistic budget, but I hope you get the idea, right? You could go from thinking that there's no way you can live within your means. I assure you, you can, right? You might not make that drastic of a change and have $785 left over at the end of the month, but I guarantee you, with some effort, I bet you can save quite a bit of money. We're going to revisit this again here in a second. All right, now you guys got to help me stay on track here. We start at 1 o'clock, got to 2:20. All right, so we're rocking and rolling on our budget. We list our revenues, our non-discretionary, our discretionary. Then we categorized everything and we set some realistic limits on our budget. We established a miscellaneous, so we have a little bit of a cushion for unexpected things. And then we're going to track our budget every single week, at least every single month, and see how we did on sticking to our budget. And where we fall short, things come up, we make adjustments. But it's a non-stop thing, and it can be fun. Please do it with your significant other. All right. So what about savings? That wasn't even in our budget yet, right? So what is savings? It's a safety net. Your savings account should be a safety net. A lot of financial experts, different articles will give you different opinions. A lot of financial advisors will tell you that you need to have 6 months of non-discretionary expenses saved up. And that sounds like a lot, and it may take you a really long time to get there. But let me ask you this. Would any of you be worried about money if you had 6 months of non-discretionary bills sitting in your bank account? Would you be worried about money?
Not so much.
Not near as much, I would hope, right? So it's kind of what savings is about. And sure, savings is also about saving up for things that you want to buy. I mentioned that my wife and I, we have a savings account. We automatically put money in it. But we also have our allowance. And so if I want to save up for like a new gun, usually, or some kind of a scope, some kind of accoutrement, or some kind of new cool camping knife or new tent, I save my allowance up until I have enough to buy it. That's how we do it. But a savings account, you're you're building up money for emergencies and for things that you want. So instead of seeing savings as something that you put money into at the end of the month, if it is available, instead, this is what you do. Let's go back to our budget for a second. So I have savings down here, but if we truly are going to follow this pay yourself first idea, here's what you do. Don't make it an end of the month, if we can, kind of a thing. What pay it first means in this context is make it a non-discretionary item in your budget. Put that in your budget. At the beginning of the month, put that money in your savings account. Once you get on track to where you can, you get a budget like this, put that money in your savings account at the beginning of the month, not at the end. That will also add a layer of discipline to your spending as you go through the month, because if you're tracking your money every week, you're taking a look at your budget, how much money you have in your account, which bills are still need to get, are still going to get paid. It'll add a layer of discipline for you. Like, wow, you know what? We've only got this much money left. We really need to be good for the rest of the month, right? All right. So that's kind of the idea of pay yourself first. We're going to revisit that one more time in a second. All right. So, and the book points out, put your money in a bank that's FDIC insured, sure. Make sure you do that, just an extra layer of protection for you. All right, let's talk about using credit. Now, that is something that I wish everybody would really take a hard look at. Credit can be a great thing because, look, it's convenience, right? You can remember when we talked about in the marketing chapter, we talked about ownership utility, right? Credit, financing things is a form of ownership utility, right? It allows you to take ownership of a product or service now and pay for it over time. Now that sounds wonderful, but it can be really, really dangerous for a lot of people. All right. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that, yes, you're going to want to, you may want to finance a car. You're going to need to finance a house for sure, right? Well, to do that, you want to have a good credit score, because if you don't have a good credit score, people that it may not extend you the loan in the first place for whatever you're trying to finance. And if they do, they could do so at a much higher interest rate, which is going to make your payments a lot higher. So if a person with a terrible credit score buys the same vehicle that I do and their credit score is terrible, their payment is going to be a lot higher than mine because my credit score is really, really good. Yours can be too, all right? So think about your credit score. There's 3 credit reporting agencies, right? Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They all report on things like your payment history. This is about things that you have financed. Your payment history, were you paying on time? Do you know that if you pay more than 30 days late, a 30 days late is a category that dings your credit a certain amount. If you have 60-day late, that dings your credit even worse, 90-day credits. And then if you go several months without paying and it goes to collections and the account is made delinquent, that really crushes your credit score. So be very careful about using credit. And if you do have some bills, some credit, pay those bills on time. And also make sure that you are paying more than the minimum amount. Do you know that if you had, say, a $5,000 credit card bill, and you only paid the minimum payment every month, it would take you years to pay it off. So pay more than the monthly payment if you can. Get rid of those. Also, your credit score is based on how much you owe, the type of credit that you use. I will tell you, it's also the amount of credit that you have available. So I know people that have a whole bunch of different credit accounts and they brag about it. Now they don't have a balance on any of them though, but you know what? Creditors sometimes see that as you're one drunken weekend away from being wildly in debt. So I would be careful about opening up a whole bunch of credit accounts. You do need some credit. You want to build some sort of credit history, but be smart about how you do it. I mean, ideally, I would steer you away from department store cards. You don't need a charge card at a department store. Save up for clothes when you need them. If there's some kind of emergency, use your one credit card instead. It probably is going to have a much lower interest rate. Quite often I go into a department store or even Cabela's, and somebody will say, hey, would you like to fill out a store credit application? You'll get 20% off today's purchases. Well, that sounds wonderful, but then I'll ask the simple question, yeah, what's the interest rate on that card? And then you, 26%. What? 26%? Are you kidding me? Don't do it. If you have those accounts, I highly encourage you to cut them up. And it's not enough. That doesn't close the account, by the way. You have to call the number on the back and cancel the account. That's my suggestion. If you have them, you're liable to use them. And if you don't pay off the balance at the end of that month, you're going to be getting charged that high interest rate every month. Take you forever to pay it off. Don't do it. So keep that in mind. Gas cards, same thing. I mean, if your parents give you one for gas, God bless you. But for the rest of you, why have a gas card, right? If you were in some kind of emergency situation, take money out of savings. If you absolutely don't have any savings, then use your credit card, your one credit card. All right. One more thing about credit cards too. Another easy way to build credit that's very responsible is to maybe, if you can't qualify for a credit card at a decent interest rate, consider getting a secured credit card. And if you do an internet search on secured credit card applications or secured credit, you'll find a million different companies out there. Essentially, you give them money, like say $200, and they give you a Visa card, and your credit limit is the $200 that you gave them. Now, that's probably going to get you a credit card at a pretty decent interest rate. And if you keep paying that on time, over time, they will actually raise your credit limit above the money that you provided. And meanwhile, you're building a credit history. Now, I would warn you though, don't carry a balance, right? If you have any kind of credit debt, your discretionary income should just about go away completely until it's paid off. That's going to stink, right? It's going to be tough, but I guarantee you, if you are debt-free except for a house and a car payment and you don't overspend on those two debts, you stick to a budget, that's going to get you well on your way to not having money issues and worries. All right, so just as kind of review, right, credit cards, sure, they're convenient. Yeah, you can track your expenses, but you know what? You can track your expenses with your bank account too. The downside is most people just aren't disciplined enough. So I would even tell you, if you have discipline issues with credit, and you cut down to maybe one credit card, don't carry it. Don't carry it. Right? That forces you to really think about those impulse buys. You'd have to drive home and get it before you could buy something, and hopefully that little space of time will give you time to think about whether you really need it or not. Is it a need or is it a want? And a lot of times, you know, high interest and fees. By the way, there's probably no need to ever pay like an annual fee on a credit card. They used to be really popular. Get offered a credit card, but it had like a $90 annual fee. And so you'd get a card that already had a balance of $90 on it. There's plenty of free ones out there, so be careful about that. Also pay on time. All right, so things to look for. Understand what the grace period is. The grace period is essentially saying, you know, your bill, your payment is due within 30 days, but, you know, we give you 10 days kind of wiggle room at the end of that before we're going to ding your credit. So essentially you might have 40 days really to make your payment, but don't chance it. Pay as soon as you can, right? Get that paid off. But know what your grace period is. Know what your annual percentage rate is. Know about any late fees you're going to get hit with if you have late payments, any other fees. All right, so in the past, we've had some issues with credit cards. We're talking about on the lender side. Things that they were doing that seem to contribute to people getting in trouble with debt. So the government stepped in, made some, there's a couple of laws I want you to be familiar with. These were passed in quick succession, one in 2009, the CARD Act. Essentially, it prevents lenders, like from making any big changes to your credit accounts. You know, it's like signing an agreement with somebody and then them changing the rules after the fact, right? It's not really fair. Credit card companies used to do that. They also would like do things like change interest rates. They would also do some kind of predatory type lending. Like they used to set up booths on college campuses on registration day. All this, you know, students were walking around. They'd have a booth, a bunch of T-shirts or water bottles or something, some kind of little trinket giveaway. And say, hey, do you have a credit card? Well, come on over. It only take 5 minutes. You know, we could get you your very own Visa card and we'll give you a free T-shirt or whatever. And what a lot of these kids would just like, oh, well, you know, a magic piece of plastic that I have to spend money. And they didn't know there were huge fees attached to it, really high interest rates, all kinds of additional fees. And they'd get into credit card problems really quickly. So they put some restrictions on that and on some of the fees that they're allowed to charge. Another one came in 2010, Dodd-Frank. Remember, this is kind of a result of the 2008 financial crisis we talked about in chapter 1. So some of the reforms that came along with all those changes to some of the lending practices of banks and the credit mortgage-backed securities, that whole market. Some other provisions were to help consumers. So they established like a consumer protection bureau, whether it's arguable whether that's actually done any good, but they're trying, right? And they also required companies to write their rules in the documentation that comes to your card in plain English. So just some basic rules, right? First of all, put the card down. I would even add maybe close the account, cut up the card, pay it off, forget it exists. Pay down your amount every month, pay more than the minimum or you're never gonna, it's gonna take you forever to pay it off. Where possible, only occasionally use your credit card and pay it off the same month, if at all possible. I left this in here because it's in your book. It says, well, use a debit card, but you know what? People that lack discipline using a credit card typically aren't a whole lot better when it comes to a debit card. So another idea for you, this is not in the book, it's not testable, but just a thought. And my wife and I did this in the past. We don't do it anymore. We've gotten pretty disciplined, but in the past, we go to a cash system. We read this as an idea in some article and we used it. It worked. We would give ourselves our spending money, whatever our allowance was at the beginning of the month, in cash. That way, every time you want to spend money, you can look in your wallet and you can watch it go away. And it tended to keep us more disciplined because, you know, you get 3 weeks into the month and you want to buy something, but you look in your wallet and you're like, oh, I only have $20 left and I really want to go out to eat on Friday with our friends. So I'm not going to buy this, whatever it is, right? I don't have to have it. So just an idea to help keep you disciplined. All right, some of these financial securities, we're not going to go back through these because we already covered them in the last 2 chapters, right? In the finance chapter, right? So this part of this chapter, it's kind of talking about building your wealth for the long term. So we talked about setting a monthly budget. It's very, very short term, right? It's very good. We also talked about building longer term like savings for emergencies, right? So that's a little bit longer term. This part of the chapter is starting to get into building wealth for the long term, like creating wealth for your future, your retirement, for example. So keep that in mind as we go through this. It kind of starts talking about being diversification as if you're supposed to just start, you know, opening up accounts with investment firms and buying stocks and bonds pell-mell. I caution you against that. We've already covered these things, so you know what they are. But there's probably some safer ways to do some diversified investment. So we'll get to that in a second. All right, you can't go through a broker, by the way, to help you make sense of, you know, the financial markets. It's kind of can be kind of a scary thing if you're new to it. So you could go through a full service broker to help you buy some of these long-term investments, stocks, bonds, etc. And they'll give you advice. You go to a brokerage firm, open up an account. They will assign a broker to you. You will know their name. They will contact you, and maybe you'll sit down even together, and they'll ask you a ton of questions about your current financial situation, short-term goals, your longer-term financial goals, any major purchases you want to make. You know, they'll ask you maybe even when you want to retire, kind of getting into kind of what a financial advisor does. But they will keep all that stuff in mind, and then they will try to make money by giving you advice on investments. And you can, I mean, you can read an article about some great company and get excited about it. You could call up your broker and say, hey, why don't you buy me 200 shares of this common stock, for example. And they may agree with you or try to talk you out of it, but they'll make the trade because they make money, whether you make money on your investments or not. They'll even call you sometimes, perhaps, and say, hey, this looks like a great deal. I'm going to sell this and buy this. And you're like, okay, great. Sounds good. You know more than I do. Understand, though, you're going to get charge fees for this. It could still be worth it for you. But there's also discount brokers. I think most of us probably get to the point where we use discount broker. Now, discount broker could be an app on your phone, a website. Like if you go to Price Waterhouse and set up an account, or Ameritrade.com or eTrade.com, you can set up an account and you can make trades yourself. You can buy stocks and bonds, etc. And all those websites and even the apps provide research for you. So you can do research on things that you are interested perhaps in investing in. So the fees, you know, they're going to make some money off you somehow, but it's a lot less than what a full service broker would charge you. And then there's kind of this hybrid thing called a robo-advisor. A robo-advisor, I don't know, it's kind of cool. I haven't tried it yet. And if any of you have, please speak up. Let us know how it worked out. If you know somebody that did. I don't, but I'm intrigued by it. The book mentions Wealthfront and Betterment.com. You go to these websites and essentially you answer a long series of questions about your finances and your short-term financial goals, your long-term financial goals, and ask you questions that try to gauge your risk tolerance too. Remember from, was that chapter 9, where we talked about the risk return curve down here. We got the really safe investments that maybe don't make a lot of money, but they're safer. And then all the way in, we're talking about investing in individual stocks, like common stock, right? Super risky, but you can make a lot of money. And then we got all kinds of things in between, like maybe a diversified mutual fund, for example, right? Some sort of, maybe your pension fund is invested in mutual funds, some different funds. Maybe your IRA, same way. It's an easy way for most of us to get into a diversified portfolio without knowing about, being experts and all this stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, people like Chris is really into this stuff. God bless you. I play around with stocks some myself, just a little. I mean a little. Like this morning, I bought $100 worth of AMC theaters or AMC entertainment. It's down to like $2.20 or $2.10 a share this morning. And I think it'll bounce back a little, at least a little bit in a couple of months, and then I'll probably sell it because, the suggestions from the experts are like, maybe buy, maybe not, might go bankrupt, who knows. But for the most part, mutual funds and our IRAs. All right, so building a portfolio yourself, this is in the book, so I'm gonna leave it in here. But it just talks about being in a diversified portfolio. So this mainly, I think, applies to people that are trying to build a portfolio themselves. Remember the risk-return trade-off. Now, they're also doing things, you can also do things that are beyond finances to invest in your future. And congratulations, by the way, you're all doing one of them right this second. You're investing in your education, right? So you're going to school, you're staving off some of that immediate gratification of just working a full-time job and spending your money, right? You're investing in your future. On average, not always, but on average, more educated people earn more over the course of their life. So good on you, stay in school, get your degree, whatever your academic goal is, stick to it, get there, all right? It'll be good for your future. Also, health and fitness. A lot of people don't think about this. A lot of people think they don't have time to exercise or eat healthy. I assure you, you can work it in if you make it a priority. And when you're healthier, you can focus better. You tend to perform better at work. Study after study indicates this. You also maybe feel better about yourself, gives you more confidence. That more confidence helps you in your career, also helps the way you perceive yourself as well as how other people perceive you. So try to work in, eat as healthy as you can. Yes, eat some vegetables every day. You should probably carry a water bottle with you at all times, be drinking water throughout the day, right? And try to get enough rest. I know that's a tough one. I struggle with that, but try to get enough rest. All right, and then make yourself marketable. If you possibly can, for example, maybe try to get a part-time job in the career field that you would like to work in after graduation. That can do nothing but help you. It might not be possible, but if you can do that, there's also sometimes summer internships in an area or an industry that you would like to work in. Give those a go. Try to get one of those. And you might even volunteer to work. Might be some volunteer opportunities that'll give you some experience in your chosen profession or your chosen industry that you want to work in. So keep those things in mind. All right, now let's talk. We're gonna end with this. We're gonna talk about building that long-term wealth. Two ways to do it. We're gonna talk about individual retirement accounts, and we're gonna talk about your company's pension fund. All right, so first let's talk about IRAs. IRAs, and by the way, you can go, it's an investment account essentially, right? You can go to the bank that you bank with. In fact, you could walk into any bank, say you'd like to open up an IRA account, and they will be more than happy to help you do that, right? And they'll ask you a bunch of questions or guide you through it. But you can put money in it. It's an investment account. Two different ways that those work. A traditional IRA means that you're actually reducing this year's taxable income by the amount that you put into the fund during that $60,000 a year. Maybe this is after you graduate, right? But let's say you make $60,000 a year and you contribute $6,000. I think actually it's $5,500 or $6,500 a maximum that you can put in each year, right? So let's say you put in $6,000 into your retirement account over the course of a year. Your taxable income would no longer be 60, it would be 54,000, right? So it lowers your taxable income this year, gives you a little bit of a tax break, cool. But the downside is that your earnings, you know, that as that IRA grows, you keep doing it every year and that thing is growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you know, the more money you have in a pot, the faster it grows. It grows kind of exponentially over time, right? So the problem with a traditional IRA is that when you take that money out, pay taxes on it, whatever the tax rate is at that time. So you don't necessarily know exactly how much money you got in this account because you're going to have to pay taxes on it in the future. Whereas a Roth IRA, which I highly recommend, it's not going to reduce your taxable income for this year, but your earnings on it are. That means as that pile of money grows, it's all yours. You've already paid taxes on it. Pretty cool, right? I will tell you that you can take money out of your individual retirement account, but you will pay penalties. But those penalties help keep you disciplined. I would tell you, if at all possible, don't touch it. It's not for spending now. It's for spending 30 years from now, 40 years from now, okay? Leave it alone. All right. Also, so we're gonna finish up with this. Planning for retirement, those employer pension plans. And they have different names, right? I think you've probably all heard of 401k, but there are some other kinds. Typically a 401k is for those private sector for-profit businesses, whereas 403b is for like schools, like say MCC, and 457 is primarily for government. But essentially they're kind of the same thing. It's a pension plan. What this allows you guys to do is have money, you elect to have money automatically taken out of your paycheck every month and put into the funds that you choose. And HR will walk you through the different funds that are available, and they're in different risk categories typically, right? So you can elect to have a certain percentage of your income put into your retirement account every month. Do that. I would put in the maximum they allow you to, because here's the thing, you're poor now, right? Any amount of money that's more than you're banking now, you're going to get used to very quickly and enjoy. So why not have the money taken out? You won't miss it. You won't miss it if it's automatically taken out of every paycheck. The only time you'll think about it, in fact, is probably when you get a statement in an email every quarter or every 6 months, and you'll get an email every year asking you to revisit your plan and see if you want to move any of your percentages around. So for example, if you elect to have maybe I don't know, 8% of your pay taken out and put into the funds that you choose, you can choose, since you're young, you know, you've got maybe your low risk funds, your medium risk funds, and they may be called Fund A, B, C, D. They might be called the Pacific Growth Fund. There's a million different names, but they'll probably be in risk categories, right? You got your low risk categories, your medium, and your highs. You guys are young, so maybe I would have 10% in these low risk funds. Maybe I would have 40% in the medium range funds, and maybe I would have the rest, quite a bit, in the higher risk funds, because you guys are young. You've got time to ride out those peaks and valleys, right, in the economy. Whereas people a little older like me, I have maybe 20%, I think, in the lower end range funds. I've got the bulk of mine in the middle, like 60% in the middle. And then I've got just a little bit over here on the riskiest side of things. And then as I approach retirement, I'm going to start shifting things even further over towards the safe side. And that perhaps when I actually retire, maybe I'm going to move my money into things that are just going to give me a sustained income, like preferred stock and bonds. Okay, so my point is this: if you, let's go back to our budget one more time. Make yourself a budget, pay yourself first. In fact, you might even consider paying yourself twice, meaning take this long-term wealth building and put it here also. And obviously, as you make more money, these numbers will change, right? But maybe make that a non-discretionary expense for you as well. Because paying yourself first, you're building a savings for emergencies. And anything, once you build up those 6 months of non-discretionary expenses, any savings after that, heck, you know, you can buy something you really want. Maybe you can pay cash for a cool car, or buy some nicer clothes, or a really cool new rifle, or a case of ammo, or whatever it is that you want, right? But at the same time, you should pay yourself second, right? So that you're building some long-term wealth. You know, maybe that's a combination of your pension plan and your IRAs. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out because it's what my wife and I do, and you might also consider giving some money to charity also. So my wife and I do these 3 things. We've been doing this for years. We're not rich by any means at all, but you know what? We don't worry about money. I mean, we're both college professors. We don't make a whole lot of money now, but we don't really want to worry about money because we have a savings account. That is our emergency fund. That gives us money to give to charity, give God. You're a Christian person of faith, right? And also we're building wealth for our long-term financial health. But it takes work, takes discipline. We make a budget and we track it every single month. And we go through it every week to make sure that we're on track to meet our goal for the month. All right, that's all I have for you. You guys have any questions for me? Any questions about this stuff? And Chris, if you want to stay tuned, you and I can chat about what you're talking about.
Hang on 1 second. I just had a phone call. I don't know how long that'll take, but I'm staying around.
Yeah, okay, no worries.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, guys. And if you need me, don't forget, I'm a phone call away. So I'll
Thank
see
you.
you. Take care.
Have a good day. Be
You
safe.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.